Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that is, frankly, almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're stepping back in time to unpack a mystery that absolutely gripped a city, totally baffled investigators, and just refused to die. We're talking about a case that sat completely unsolved for over 6 decades, haunted by the image of a child that the world seemed to have just entirely forgotten about. It's a dark, perplexing journey for sure, but a deeply important one about identity, memory, and the relentless pursuit of the truth. So let's set the eerie scene, right back in 1957 Philadelphia, where a simple walk in the woods literally changed history forever.
Picture it, a bitterly cold February morning in Philadelphia. A young guy is out walking through this desolate wooded area, just checking his muskrat traps. It's totally quiet, routine stuff, until he stumbles upon something that would go on to haunt America for decades to come. Right there, just abandoned among the winter brush, was a cardboard box, and inside that box lay the lifeless body of a small boy, estimated to be just 4 to 6 years old. He had no ID on him, he had no name, just this silent, incredibly tragic presence out in the freezing woods.
Part 1. A horrifying 1957 discovery. Okay, let's dive into the immediate aftermath of this finding, because this is where things get truly bizarre.
You'd think the police switchboards would be lighting up with frantic parents, right? But nothing. Crickets. The police check their records, and this chilling realization sets in. There wasn't a single missing persons report in the entire area that matched this little boy. No one was stepping forward to claim him. Just try to imagine the emotional weight of that for the detectives working the scene. You've got a child, maybe 5 years old, who has been entirely forgotten by the world. How does a kid just vanish from society without a single person noticing? Well, as they geared up for what would become a massive, unprecedented hunt for his identity, the local papers gave him a nickname that would end up sticking for over half a century. They called him America's Unknown Child. And the one question on everyone's mind was simply, Part 2, Clues and Dead Ends.
So this kicks off an absolutely massive response from the Philly police. I mean, we're talking about sheer desperate scale here. The authorities launched one of the most intense and sweeping investigations in U.S. history. 400,000. That's the number of flyers the police printed and just plastered everywhere. They actually took the grim step of having the boy's face reconstructed, and they put that image all over the region. Shop windows, post offices, they were handing them out on street corners. And sure enough, tips started flooding in by the thousands. People really wanted to help solve this thing. But despite the massive scale of the campaign, every single lead resulted in absolutely nothing.
To understand why detectives were pulling their hair out over this, just put yourself in their shoes for a second and look at the physical clues they had to work with. It was a bizarre, totally paradoxical crime scene. The boy's body showed heartbreaking signs of long-term neglect. He was severely malnourished. But then, his hair had been recently cut. In fact, clumps of freshly cut hair were found right there on his body. And that cardboard box he was found in, they traced it to a bassinet sold by a local JCPenney store. It's just so confusing, right? I mean, who takes the time to give a haircut to a child they're severely neglecting, only to ultimately abandon them in a bassinet box? Part 3. The decades-long mystery.
So weeks turn into months, months into years, and the trail goes ice cold. The boy in the box kind of just became this dark piece of local lore. And you know how it is, nature abhors a vacuum. Without facts, people start guessing, and these major theories emerged. Some thought he was just an undocumented orphan, abandoned because a caretaker panicked. Others thought it was an illegal adoption, like a really dark transaction gone horribly wrong. But the most chilling lead actually came years later from a woman known only as M. She claimed her abusive mother had essentially purchased this boy and later killed him in a fit of rage. Her story was deeply disturbing, and shockingly, it actually matched some highly specific, unreleased details from the crime scene. But despite how compelling the narrative was, authorities could never find a single shred of hard proof to back her story up. So once again, another dead end.
Part 4. The DNA Breakthrough.
All right, let's fast forward out of the 20th century. Decades of old-school detective work, knocking on doors, chasing down wild rumors, analyzing these physical clues, it all hit a brick wall. But then, a new scientific savior stepped onto the scene, forensic genealogy. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it works. It's basically this brilliant combination of high-tech genetic analysis mixed with old-school historical family tree research. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact same technology that famously led investigators to finally capture the Golden State Killer. Suddenly, the detectives working the boy in the box case realized they had a game-changing new tool at their disposal. They just needed the DNA. It's crazy to think about, but we are visually compressing 65 years of agonizing waiting into a single timeline here. From that horrifying discovery in '57, straight through decades of the cold years. But look at 2019. Using incredible modern methods, scientists were actually able to successfully extract the boy's DNA again. It was a painstaking process, but this time, the genetic evidence was robust enough to finally speak. It took a few more years of meticulous family tree mapping, but the whole shebang finally culminated in December of 2022.
Part 5. The Name Reclaimed. For 65 long years, this little boy was defined by the cardboard box he was found in. He was a symbol of forgotten youth, basically a ghost haunting the Philadelphia PD. But in December 2022, that 65-year streak of anonymity was finally, permanently broken. They found him. His name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Seeing his name starkly presented like this honors the identity that was so cruelly denied to him for over 6 decades. He was no longer America's unknown child. He was Joseph.
Part 6. The Dark Truth. Now you might be thinking, great, they found his name. Case closed, right? Nope. Uncovering Joseph's identity didn't actually solve the mystery. It just exposed a much darker truth. For years, everyone assumed he was an orphan from nowhere, maybe a drifter child, and that finding his name would tie this whole thing up with a neat little bow and bring closure. But the shocking reality is that Joseph wasn't from nowhere at all. Investigators traced him back to a real, biological, completely traceable family right there in Philadelphia. He wasn't even an only child. He had multiple siblings. Some of his family members were even still alive.
So the absolutely crucial point here, and honestly the most haunting detail of this entire 65-year saga, is simply this. No one in his family had ever reported him missing. When you really sit and consider the deep, unsettling psychological mystery of his family dynamic, it just sends chills down your spine. He lived in that city, he had parents, he had siblings, and yet when he ended up in a box in the woods, his own flesh and blood never even raised an alarm.
Because of this really disturbing reality, authorities are left with some incredibly dark suspicions. To this day, we still don't have an officially confirmed explanation for how he died. The working theory right now is that little Joseph was likely severely abused or just entirely hidden away from the outside world. It's highly possible his very existence was kept a total secret, maybe even within branches of his own family tree. And perhaps the most tragic part of all this, even with his identity officially reclaimed today, no one has ever been charged with the crime in connection to his death. The grave that once just read unknown finally has a name, but the truth of what actually happened to him, that remains buried.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we're forced to grapple with the exact same questions that have been keeping detectives awake at night for decades. Who hurt Joseph Augustus Zarelli? What kind of environment was this kid living in? And why, when he disappeared, did absolutely no one bother to look for him? Grounding ourselves in empathy for this child, it's just a really stark reminder of how incredibly vulnerable the youngest members of our society truly are. And it really leaves us with this final haunting thought to chew on. How does an entire human life go completely unnoticed? The story of the boy in the box proves that reality is often much stranger and significantly darker than any fiction we could possibly write. It's an amazing testament to the power of science to reclaim the past, for sure, but it's also a chilling reminder of the secrets that families can hide right in plain sight. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep seeking the truth, and I'll catch you next time.